Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. My guest is all the way from Israel. She is a new Knesset member and her name is Orit Farkash Hacohen, representing the Blue and White Party led by Benny Gantz. Orit, an absolute pleasure to have you on the Middle East Report today, especially as you are a Knesset member. But can you share with us your upbringing and your early life living in Israel?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm here getting off my flight from Jerusalem to London, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm a born Israeli. I was born in Ashdod, which is a city on the seashore of the Middle East, a beautiful city on the beach. But most of my adult life, I've been living in Jerusalem, the beautiful Jerusalem. I have a law degree from the Hebrew University. I did my clerkship in the Supreme Court. I worked in the government for the last 20 years, both in antitrust law as a litigator and then as an energy regulator. And I've been also in a private law firm. And of course, now I'm a Knesset member. I'm a mother to 4 children. My oldest son is an officer in the Israeli Navy, and my youngest is 8 years old. I personally didn't do the army because I'm an observant woman. And in Israel, if you are more religious, then they give the girls the decision to choose whether they want to do the army or to serve national service, which I did in a hospital in Jerusalem.
Fantastic. So can you share with us your experience of working in a hospital and your national service? Because really it's the mandatory on behalf of Israelis to serve in the military, and those who are exempt obviously choose different fields, and you chose to serve in the hospital. So what was that like for you?
So it was like a very demanding job for over a year. I was put in a gastroenterology department, and I was literally a technician there. I worked closely with the physicians, and I handled the clinics in the afternoon. And I did all the procedura, and I dealt with people who had cancer in their gastro systems. It was really a maturing experience, when I meet other girls who went to the army, because in Israel it's mandatory. You need to go either to the army or to national service, and only the girls who come from more observant and conservative families, they have the choice to decide whether they want to go to the army or they prefer to do something else. So some girls go to schools, to community centers in struggling, suburbs. And I decided to go to the hospital. So it's called Shaare Tzedek in Yerushalayim. And there I started my romance with Jerusalem. And I wore the white robes and everything. I worked really hard, and I even fainted twice because of procedures that I saw. But it was very, very rewarding because I felt like I did something very important.
Absolutely. So what was it that made you decide you wanted to pursue a career in law and study law?
Actually, it wasn't that easy to decide. I was confused between medicine. Like I told you, I did the national service in a hospital, and law. And then I decided to go to the law practice because it's such a broad-minding profession with so many specialties, and you can find yourself doing either public work or private work. You can do business law, you can do competition law, you can do criminal law, and it's really, I think it's something that you work with your mind. And it opens many, many possibilities because many lawyers do many other things later on in life. I don't regret this choice. I went to the Hebrew University, and I always liked economic subject to deal with, and I'm most favorable of free markets and competition. And when I went to the antitrust agency, it's like roughly similar to the FTC, the American FTC. And I was a litigator there, and I got a lot of backbone and experience being a very young lawyer, handling, big price collusion, price fixing, cartels, cases, handling it before, like the leading lawyers in Israel, being a very young lawyer. And there I gained, I think, a lot of the backbone that served me later in life.
And so in September 2011, you were appointed to be the head of Israel's public utilities. That's a huge job, isn't it? So can you share with us what you were able to do and achieve, and how you were able to make life better for ordinary Israelis?
Okay. First of all, I think it was the biggest achievement so far. I was the first woman to be appointed to head the Israeli Energy Regulatory Agency. Basically, its main responsibility is to make sure that the energy tariff, the electricity bills that every Israeli citizen pays, are not inflated, because we have a big monopoly in Israel those years, and also to create conditions to promote competition in the Israeli energy market. These years were very, very challenging. I also had a 6-month-old baby.
Wow.
And my husband said, when there is a will, there is a way. So he did most of the work. I got the easy way. I sat in the office for 5 years, and it was, I think, the most challenging time in my life. These are the years where, for the first time in Israel, big private producers of power penetrated the Israeli energy market, and also the first solar market. Now in Israel, we have a big industry of solar panels, around the world. And I had the privilege to be the regulator and to head the agency during very challenging years where the energy market changed its face completely. Also, I don't know if you know, but in the Bible it says that Israel is rich with milk and honey.
Absolutely.
But apparently we have huge gas reservoirs offshore the Israeli.
I just saw them. I was in Israel last week, and we're at Caesarea, and just looking out, I saw that big gas station on the coast. So can you share briefly how the natural gas and the discovery of natural gas is going to transform Israel's energy needs, even reporting that Israel could be selling natural gas to the Europeans, which might upset the Russians?
Sure. So first of all, this is really not short of a miracle. It's a great blessing for Israel, especially if you recall in 2012, there was the Arab Spring in Egypt,
oh, yes,
where they had a change of regime. That created the hugest energy crisis in Israel ever, because Israel lost its only supplier of natural gas, which is Egypt. But, God bless us, we found Israeli gas reservoir just a few years before. So after a crisis of 1.5 years where Israel consumed contaminating fossil fuels and because we did not have any natural gas, the Israeli reservoir started operating. And now we are basically independent energetically. And you're right, we see that as a strategic strength for Israel. On the short term, we already supply natural gas to Jordan. Hopefully, shortly, we will supply and we will cooperate with Egypt. And of course, the long runs are, our plans to help Europe, which is also facing a Russian monopoly on the energy side.
Absolutely.
So we have big plans for our gas. Me personally, when I was a regulator, I had a few struggles with this gas company because it's an Israeli huge monopoly. It's a partnership, by the way, an American and Israeli partnership, and it's also a monopoly. And I fought a little bit with inflated gas prices to the domestic public in Israel, because this was this kind of position. It was very challenging. I was dealing a lot with economics, with supporting the big players of the energy market, but on the other hand, struggling with them a little bit to make sure that the prices for the public are fair.
Excellent. So you've done a great job. And then if that wasn't challenging enough, you decide to enter into the lion's den, as it were, of Israeli politics and the Knesset. So why did you choose to enter into politics, and why did you choose Benny Gantz's party, the Blue and White Party?
So lion's dens, I think, is the greatest description ever. I'm going to pass it over to my family. It's a good question. When I left the government after 20 years, I didn't want to go back to public doing. I wanted to be in the private sector, having some quiet life. But I believed after many years in the public sector and being, it's like a germ, having the passion of doing something that is connected to public doing, it's like a, you know, it's like a disease. You can't get over it. And even being in the private sector, I looked at what's happening in Israel. And as a senior public official, I had a lot of critics. And I thought that Israel needs fresh blood and fresh leadership and new politics. And, you know, we have our fair share of achievements, but we have the same prime minister for over 15 years. And I'm from those Israelis who is a big patriot, but think that we need a fresh blood. And Benny Gantz, who's the former head of IDF, approached me, and we had a talk, and I was very impressed with him. And then I followed my heart. You know, there comes an age when I say, I stopped following how it would look on my CV. And I said, that's it. We had a big discussion in my living room. The kids say, no, you're crazy, don't do it. And my husband said, you must do it. So I worked with my heart. And I think that in such a complicated neighborhood, a state, a small Jewish state with so many enemies and so many challenges, you know, increasing in the new world with, you know, now international problems with the radical Islam and everything. It's not even now a geographical dangerous. Israel is now facing strategic problems that are even more complicated from before. Then suddenly not dealing only with energy, but suddenly being a parliament member who is dealing with every aspect that has to do with Israel's wellness, I think it's a privilege.
Absolutely. So let's have a look at this short video that explains how Israel's Knesset works. And that was the Knesset, which is the very heart of Israel's democracy. And if you get a chance to go to Israel, do recommend visiting the Knesset. It's an incredible building. The architecture is incredible. What I love about the Knesset, Orit, is the fact that the actual chamber itself is based on the menorah. So you can actually see the menorah, which is the symbol of the Jewish people. Now, what's so interesting about Israeli democracy is it's so vibrant, it's so diverse, and it's so colourful. So lots of small little parties. How does this actually work?
Oh, you're absolutely right. It makes me dizzy. It's like, you know, I am a graduate of the Kennedy School in Boston, and New England is famous for changes in its weather. So they have a saying there, if you want to know what's the weather in New England, just wait for 5 minutes. So this is parallel to the Israeli politics, especially in the last few months. It's very hectic, it's very dynamic. The structure of the Knesset is very complicated because it is built of 120 Knesset members. And in order to create a cabinet, you need to have a majority of more than 60 people of the Knesset members. And that is why we are having all these events now where the current prime minister couldn't recruit the 61 parliament members to create the cabinet or the government. And that is why the Knesset decided to go for a second election. So it's interesting. It is working with a main chamber where people stand and they talk about issues, and we have a chair of the parliament, and then there are committees. I'm a member of the finance committee, and there is also an economic committee, an education committee, you know, the subcommittees of the parliament. And basically, like in every country, its job is to make sure that the government is, operating properly, and to push forwards legislation and so on.
Excellent. Yeah. So two quick questions regarding that. So my first one is, you're representing the Blue and White Party of former IDF Chief of Staff Benny Gantz. So can you share with us the policies and the values of the Blue and White Party, and also why you think Benny Gantz will make a good Prime Minister?
So the Blue and White Party basically achieved an amazing achievement in the last elections. A party that is 3 months old, basically, achieved an equivalent amount of voices to the Likud party, and it is now the largest party in the Knesset. The Israeli politics is that we have the right-wing small religious parties, we have the Arab-originated parties, we have the lefties parties, and then we have the two major Likud and Blue and White. Blue and White advocates basically, first of all, integrity in leadership. We advocate to limit the candidacy of a prime minister, to make clearer rules about being clean politics. Whoever has a politician with indictments and so on will not be able to serve as a Knesset member. We are for a free market, but with social priorities. And of course, on the security side, headed by the head of the former head of the IDF, but also there are two other generals in this party, Gabi Ashkenazi, who was also a former head of the IDF, and Bogi Ashkenazi, who was a former IDF head and also a Ministry of Defense. We put heavy emphasis on security considerations to Israel. We talk about Jerusalem united, and under the control of the Jewish state, and the Golan Heights, part of Israel, and the security considerations above all.
So let's have a look now at the Knesset, with a clip glance of its history and all those incredible MKs that have got to incredible positions, such as Israel's great prime ministers.
Welcome to the Knesset. I'm Yuli Edelstein, Speaker of the Knesset. The Knesset is important for every Israeli citizen because the laws passed here and decisions taken affect directly every one of us. The Knesset has been involved in every major event in the history of our state. The film you're about to see will illustrate this well. I invite you to join us in experiencing Israeli democracy.
חברי הכנסת, אני אבקש להימנע מקריאות ביניים.
הגיע העת שחיילינו ישובו אל חיק המשפחה.
ישראל איננה רוצה להישאר בלבנון. אנחנו רוצים להחזיר את הבנים הביתה.
זה 4,000 שנות היסטוריה יהודית שקושרות אותנו לארץ הזאת. התנ"ך הוא הטאבו שלנו.
הטלפון צלצל לפני שנים בקהיר. הוא מצלצל עכשיו בעזה וביריחו. ואנו רבותיי מרימים את השפופרת.
Welcome to the Knesset, Israel's legislature. If its walls could only speak, they would tell the story of Israeli democracy. The essence of the reborn nation was formulated here. In the final analysis, the decisions taken here shape our lives.
אנו שולטים על למעלה מ2 מיליון פלסטינאים.
אין ולא תהיה בשום תנאי ובשום אופן מדינה פלסטינית.
רק מי שנולד לאם יהודייה או התגייר כהלכה נחשב כיהודי.
אומר שדמך אדום יותר.
יירשם כיום הבגידה
היום
הגדולה.
הזה עלולה הכנסת לקבוע כי ארץ ישראל איננה שייכת לעם ישראל.
מדיניות שתגדיל את מספר העניים.
על הפרק הכרעה קשה שמעטות כמוה.
אנו עומדים בפני הכרעות גורליות.
מחיר הדמים לא היה לשווא.
The Knesset didn't always reside here. Before it moved to its present quarters, it occupied a humble building in downtown Jerusalem, Beit Fruman. Only in 1966, after Israel's 18th birthday, was this building on Givat Ram in Jerusalem inaugurated. Since then, all of Israel's leaders have passed through its gates. Since then, there has been no center of activity more dynamic, more tempestuous, or more influential on life in Israel. A place that is open to all citizens and residents, to all communities and sectors. All the prevailing views of Israelis are represented in this chamber, the plenary hall. The Knesset is also a stage for world leaders, appealing from its podium to the people in Israel. Over the years, American presidents have come here to express their unique relationship with Israel.
Our journey. Citizens of Israel, Masada shall never fall again, and America will be at your side.
German presidents have stood at the Knesset's podium, apologizing for the crimes of the Nazis.
Für das, was Deutsche getan haben, für mich und meine Generation.
But the most exciting visit of all occurred in November 1977. Anwar Sadat, president of Egypt, then Israel's greatest enemy, came to Jerusalem to extend his hand in peace.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Sadat's historic visit to the Knesset touched the hearts of Israelis.
You always call me an old lady, Mr. President.
But immediately after that visit, heated debate began over the price of peace. In the center of the plenary hall is the government table, with the seat of the prime minister at its head. Often, it's the loneliest seat in the Knesset. On their shoulders, prime ministers carry all the affairs of state in routine times and times of emergency. The Knesset watches over the prime minister's work, expressing confidence in the government or voting to bring it down. The Knesset approves peace agreements signed by prime ministers and hears their decisions to go to war.
המלחמה לא נגמרה.
אנחנו נגן על הילדים שלנו. אם תורם יד של חיה, דו-רגלית עליהם תיגדע היד הזאת.
אנו נאבקים על מה שלכל אדם בעולם הנאור נראה עניין מובן מאליו.
And what's so amazing about Israel is the vibrancy of its democracy, and you'll only see that democracy in the Middle East. Can you share with us, what is your role? Because many of our viewers be thinking, you're a Knesset member, you work and serve the Israeli Knesset, which is the Israeli parliament. What do you do on a daily basis?
On a daily basis, we come to the Knesset early in the morning. Usually there are 3 days in a week where there are committees in the morning, all the way up until 3 o'clock, committees that do on a daily basis. And after that, we go to the main chamber where there are votes and other issues with all the Knesset members until the evening. We even had meetings in the Knesset, votes that took place, that were finished at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Luckily, I live in Jerusalem, so I have a short drive home. Also, we meet a lot of people, and we do a lot of work spreading the word of Israel, its challenges, supporting our supporters like I'm doing right now. For me, it's a new experience to meet the, Christians who support Israel. I come from the energy market, and I always say that only now I see what is a really good energy, because I was never exposed to the amazing work that you do. And it is absolutely amazing. As an Israeli, I was more exposed to the Israeli diaspora's work, to the Jewish diaspora support of Israel. And I think what you do is even more important. And I was never fully exposed to this work. And now, as a Knesset member, I go to dinners, I speak to people who come to visit Israel, all kinds of supporters, students, politicians from all over the world. So it's a combination of public and like a spokesman to Israel as a representative, and also a parliamentary work that you do. Of course, the media and the press has a lot to do with being a parliament member. If it's not in the press, it's not there. And I'm still, I'm still adjusting from being a professional and official public servant to being a political, Knesset member.
Excellent. So let's have a look at the Knesset at a glance, part 2.
These pictures were taken after the Yom Kippur War. It is here in the Knesset that the commendations were awarded. Many of the commendations went to those who fell in battle, accepted in their names by their relatives. The ceremony was held here in the Chagall Hall, the State Hall. It hosts numerous ceremonies, receptions, and special occasions. The hall is named after Jewish artist Marc Chagall, who created its tapestries and mosaics. Many works of art are displayed in the Knesset building, along with a facsimile of the Proclamation of Independence, declaring the establishment of the State of Israel. Once every 7 years, the Knesset elects the president of the state. Voting is by secret ballot. But most Knesset votes are open, and every citizen knows how each and every member of Knesset voted. Voting methods have evolved over the years from a show of hands to electronic polling, but the basic principle remains the same. The majority rules.
הכנסת הכריעה ברוב קולותיה, וההחלטה מחייבת את כולם.
At the end of each national election campaign, a new Knesset is sworn in. Its members elect the Knesset Speaker, who chairs the meetings of the plenum and represents the Knesset before the people of Israel and the world. Much of the Knesset's work takes place outside the plenum, especially in its committee rooms. Detailed deliberations touch on all aspects of our lives: social matters, economics, foreign affairs, and security. The committees prepare bills for voting in the plenum. Ministers, experts, and officials are invited to the meetings to report and answer questions posed by members of the committee. In 1976, Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin came to the Foreign Affairs and Security Committee to report on an Air France flight that had been hijacked to Entebbe. Several days later, an amazing rescue operation freed the hostages, most of them Israelis and Jews. Most Knesset activities are carried out with full public scrutiny. The Knesset television channel broadcasts its debates live. The Knesset website enables citizens to keep track of deliberations in the committees and even to participate in some of them. But it's not only Knesset members who are active here. Every day, thousands of people visit the Knesset: public representatives, lobbyists, politicians, and citizens, all trying to influence the way Knesset members vote. Others come here to take part in demonstrations. As the bastion of Israel's democracy, the Knesset is where national issues are decided. It's a natural magnet for individuals and groups raising their voices in protest. And there are other moments when masses of citizens come to the Knesset to express identification, respect, grief. So it was in the difficult days following the assassination of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Hundreds of thousands came to the Knesset courtyard to pass by his coffin. It was from the Knesset that his funeral procession set out. Since it was built, this building has always been the central arena of public activity in Israel. Great personalities from around the world have visited here. All of Israel's leaders have been active here. During the next hour, you'll pass through the Knesset's halls, along walls that, if they could speak, would tell tales of the most dramatic moments in Israel's history. Think about where you are, in our one and only parliament, a place that influences so many aspects of our lives.
And Orit, I'd have to thank you for what you've just said, because that's really touching. And you know, for me, it's a great honor to have a new member of Knesset on the program,
it's my pleasure.
representing the Israeli Knesset, and having filmed in the Knesset. It's got to say the hardest thing I've ever done in broadcasting, not in terms of security, but in terms of how everything changes. So one minute you can have an interview set up, and then you have to change or something else. So it's a very dynamic place, and it's great that Israel's got such an articulate spokeswoman on behalf of Israel. But what is it extra challenging being a woman in the Knesset, and how does Israel's parliament with so many female MKs contrast to that of Israel's neighbors in the Arab world?
I think that this is one of the nicest thing about Israel. It's like a miracle inside. It's like a drop of democracy and you know, equality within the Middle East. Because, you know, I'm an opposition member. I have critics about the prime minister, but this is what we do. This is a democracy that we don't see in our Arab neighbors' countries. You also see many MKs women. For me, it's not a new experience because, you know, it was harder in the energy market, where I was really a woman in a man's industry, which is, by the way, the situation in all over the world. We have a lot of women MKs. We actually collaborate. In Kachol Lavan, we have a group of women MK. It's called the Blue and White Women. And we collaborate about women issues, and we talk, and we do activities, and we meet women progress organization, and so on. Me personally, maybe because of my conservative background, you know, I think I was privileged. I never felt like I was stopped, or I don't think I'm in blue and white because I was a woman, but because it was not an issue. By us, we also have Orna Barbivai, which was the first, how you call it, a colonel in the Israeli army, the woman colonel. And we have very, very impressive women in the Israeli parliament from all kinds and segments of the society. And as I progress in this new career, I also understand that when you are a woman MK, you start representing also and inspire other women. So I'm trying to do my best in this area. And understand that it's also another role that I have to take for the younger generation.
Now, being a member of Knesset and also being an ambassador, essentially, on behalf of Israel and representing the nation of Israel as one of Israel's member of Knesset, you are in a prime position to communicate to certainly Britain, where you are now, and also Europe, about the kind of unique security situation that Israel is facing. So, in your opinion, what is the greatest threat that Israel is facing in terms of security?
I think that Israel is a strong country, brave country.
Absolutely.
You know, my kids is serving now in the Navy. By us, it is mandatory. Every boy or girl, once they get to the age 18, they go to the army, and they give 3-4 years of their life to be there. Of course, I'm talking about the boys mostly. The girls are having a shorter thing. So the challenges are pretty big. You know, we're facing a terrible situation in the south, when kites and balloons have become explosives. You know, our kids suffer from trauma looking at balloons and kites because it has become a weapon by the Palestinian Authority, who shoots kites, explosive kites and explosive balloons to the south of Israel. On the international level, you know, my visit here is to come and talk in the British Parliament about the BDS. I think that there is a new form of anti-Semitism in the world. It is the old anti-Semitic that we know, but it is dressed and disguised in modern words, such as BDS, such as economic boycott on Israel. When we are stripping this mask, we look at the BDS. What is the BDS? It is an organization located in Ramallah. It is established by terror organization. I don't know if you know, but the BDS is formed by the Hamas, by the Islamic Jihad, which are unlegal terror organizations. And what do they preach for? They preach for the elimination of the of Israel as a homeland, not even 1 inch of land for the Israeli people. So they want to exterminate Israel. This is not a legitimate economic boycott or protest. This is, you know, the old anti-Semitism, in my view, which basically wanted to eliminate Jews or Jewish homeland from their land. And I think this is the biggest struggle. It has become like a fashion in campuses around the world, in universities. I faced it myself when I was a student at Harvard, you know, and there is a lot of double standard that takes place there. Nobody's talking about the humanitarian disaster that are being committed in Syria, you know, using chemical weapons to civilian population. Nobody talking about Morocco, who occupied, you know, north part of the Sahara Desert, or Turkey, who's done the same. And the focus here, it's not, you know, it's not to the point. When you see the voices and when you hear the acts, you realize this is not a legitimate criticism about Israel. And you see the opposite now in Bahrain. We're having now an economic international committee, you know, conference in Bahrain. And you know, for Israeli to suddenly hear the foreign minister of Bahrain, an Islamic person, saying, we want to live in peace with you, we want to dialogue with you, we want to talk to you. This is something that we do not hear from our Palestinian neighbors or other BDS or terror organization. They don't want a dialogue with us. We disengage from Gaza, and what we get is explosive kites and explosive balloons, and our kids going down to the Salem every 5 minutes with afraid of tunnels that are being dug under our land. And this is a land that is, you know, is recognized by international law. It was established by Balfour and Churchill and Great Britain leaders. You know that. This is what I'm going to talk about in the parliament. So I'm very worried about it. I'm very worried about it. And I think that in this struggle, the Christian voice that supports Israel is the strongest voice that we need to support us.
Thank you. We know that in our parliament you'll find many friends. You'll find a few enemies, sadly. But if we look at what's happening in the Republic of Ireland with their BDS legislation, the fact is that if an Irishman or an Irish woman decides to visit Jerusalem, they buy a gift in the gift shop in the Old City in Jerusalem, that they could face a heavy fine or a 5-year prison sentence. What is your response to what is an absolutely hideous endorsement of the BDS by the Irish Parliament?
I think it's a big shame. I think it's very disappointing. And I think it's a legislation of hatred. I think it's misguided. It has no basis in merits, and it's an absurd. You know, imagine me starting to legislate a law interfering with the domestic stuff of Ireland. It's absolutely an absurd, and I think it would backfire, because when things are not logical and they don't lie in the truth, they can never stand. This is my belief, and you know, we have faced a lot of challenging, and we'll face this as well. I don't think it makes any sense. I think it's a double standard. I think it's not constructive to the dialogue that needs to be built in this area. And instead of opposing people who violently kill our citizens and our kids and our children, and do not even do the distribution between a soldier and a civilian, and do not want to see 1 centimeter of a Jewish state, you know, I think it's really, you know, I don't know how to call it other than misjustice.
Now, you're going to be speaking, and I wish you all the success in the world speaking in our parliament, which is very important. Hopefully you can kick some sense into some of our politicians. But when we see the relationship with Israel and Britain today, particularly with this Conservative government, has never been stronger. But because of the political uncertainty created by Brexit, there could be a possibility that Jeremy Corbyn could become our, well, not our next Prime Minister, but certainly Prime Minister if he wins a general election. And we know his views on Israel. He used to be the president of the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. He has campaigned against Israel his entire political career. We also see that under his leadership, we've seen the rise of Jew hatred emerge to completely unacceptable levels. He's described people like Hamas and Hezbollah, who are genocidal terrorist organisations, as his friends. He's described Black September as his brothers. What is the prospect of relations between Britain and Israel if Jeremy Corbyn were to become Prime Minister?
I hope that the question of the relationship is bipartisan and would stay this way. It is a challenge, I think, not only for the state of Israel, but also, you know, England is a place that many cultures and religions live. And I think that, you know, for the sake of the great community of Jewish people in England, I hope that once Mr. Corbyn, if becomes a prime minister, would understand that a prime minister is a prime minister of everybody. And, you know, sometimes the position changes the thing, and I hope it is. About Israel, you know, it might be a bit challenging. I hope it would be an opportunity to change his mind. And, you know, the state of Israel is dependent on itself. That is our strength. That is also the criticism that we get from time to time from other strong countries around the world. But, you know, being originated and being built on the ashes of the Holocaust, this is our main DNA. This is our core of backbone. We depended on ourselves, on our armies, on our decisions, on our independent prime minister. And we don't change our policy, you know, by fashion. So if there is one person that doesn't like our policy, so be it. We will try and convince in a legitimate way, but we will not change our policy. And, you know, maybe he should come and live in the South for a month and go to the Salem every 10 seconds and see how kids at the age of kindergarten are traumatized by seeing balloons. And then he maybe should change his mind and see that there are two sides to the coins. And, you know, Israel has a right to exist. And it was established by the British Empire, you know, backed by international United Nations decisions. This is a fact, and we are here to stay. This is our historic land by the Bible, and we are not going anywhere. So,
amen to that.
Amen.
And Orit, have to discuss really, as a Knesset member, what influence can you have when you actually meet, say, British parliamentarians to tell them about Israel, encourage them to go and visit the land and actually see that Israel is not only a beacon of light in a very, very dark region, but in the terms of Israel's infrastructure, in terms of its economy, in terms of its startup nation, that Israel is an incredible success story. And where we've seen, for example, ancient prophecies about Israel that are over 3,000 years old come alive in our day, makes Israel extra special, especially being in such a dark region. How can you encourage some members of parliament not only to visit Israel, but do the right thing and stand up for Israel for the sake of our own freedom and democracy as well?
First of all, I'm still learning. I'll be smarter after my visit in the British Parliament this coming Sunday. I'm still proofing my paper and my speech in order to be very eloquent and sharp with my messages. But seriously, I think that the best way is to see Israel and to come over, because people don't understand the basic thing, how small the territory of Israel. Did you know that it is like 1/4 of Belgium? People do not understand it, and this is the big struggle. It's like a drop of a tiny land inside this huge neighborhood. And when people come to Jerusalem and they see how small it is, East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, the Western Wall, and they could see how snipers, like it was before Israel was independent, could sit and, you know, and shoot over civilians. I think that when they see how small Israel is, some people understand why is it so challenging to overlook the security consideration of the Israeli people. And I think that the idea is to show Israel by foot and then to go back and be our advocates.
Absolutely. And sadly, we're living in an age where we see such an increase in anti-Semitism to the extent we haven't seen since the 1930s and 40s, which we know is very dangerous for the Jewish people, particularly here in Britain and across Europe, where sadly in in Belgium and France, we see that paratroopers are actually guarding Jewish synagogues, Jewish museums with machine guns, patrolling the streets. Now, there is no future for the Jewish community if that's the case, where Jewish children have to be almost going to school with armed fortresses, which is completely unacceptable. So also in this country as well, that we've every year that goes by now, we see an escalation in the rise of anti-Semitic attacks. And usually what we've seen in the past, particularly when those like the CST, the Community Security Trust, put their figures together, we see that usually if Israel has to defend herself by going to war against Hamas or against Hezbollah, then we see a dramatic spike in anti-Semitic instances. But there hasn't been any military confrontation that Israel's had to face since 2014, and yet we're seeing the figures rise and rise and rise. What role do you expect our British parliamentarians and the British government to take against this rise of Jew hatred that we're seeing? Because what starts with the Jewish people never finishes with the Jewish people, and actually endangers our entire civilization and our entire Western Christian values.
Exactly. I think there should be zero tolerance to such acts. You know, a country can't advocate itself being one of the major democracies in the Western world and then, you know, overlook its minorities facing problems and hardship. And I think that the leadership in Britain and in every other countries in Europe show and demonstrate zero tolerance, you know, with punishments, with laws, with discipline that has to do with the anti-Semitics, because freedom of speech and freedom of religion are at the base of each democracy. And I think it is a shame. And they should also ask, I mean, the countries, and especially, what are the sayings that come out from the words, from speeches of their own politicians who encourage such behavior? And maybe it has to do with the change of the demographic and the population in Europe. And you know, the leadership should create a special force or a special committee to address the change in demography in Europe and the changing in the face of Europe, and how to address the rising of anti-Semitism. Because, you know, once, like you said, it starts with the Jews, but it never ends with the Jews. And these places should be a safe place to every civilian and every resident, whatever his beliefs are. And in my opinion, it should be zero tolerance and very big patient, and to pay attention of what the leaders say and how they talk and what they preach for.
Orit, I would say that the vast majority of our wonderful viewers have a real passion and love for Israel. They love the Jewish people. They want to stand with Israel. What role can our viewers play in not only making the case for Israel, but also standing with Israel, particularly in these uncertain political times that we're living in?
I think that every person counts. And I think that every person in his community, in this church, in its school, in whatever he does, can be a leader and a messenger of Israel and the value and the importance of supporting Israel. And, you know, from my 20 years in the public sector, I learned that, you know, a title doesn't guarantee a leader. A person can be a leader wherever he is in its community. And, you know, just spreading the word, keeping an eye, speaking up when somebody says other things that are either a lie or a double standard or a misunderstanding, and tear the mask of the BDS, of the boycotts, of all the misperceptions about Israel being unmoral, unjustified, and so on and so on. You know, like me, I was a student in Boston for a year, And I didn't intend to be an ambassador, but I was. And when I found people that would call out and say, oh, you're doing this, you're doing that, or people from like Ireland, I think, that once told me, you have no right to be in Israel and you're not democratic. And I say, you know what's the difference? That when there was a rising, you never said we want to exterminate Great Britain. So we have our own right to exist. And do whatever you can.
Okay, we're down to 30 seconds. So what is the chance that you can get re-elected? Because Israel needs intelligent, articulate spokeswomen like you, Orit. So is there any chance that you will get re-elected again for the next parliament come September, when Israel has general election?
I'm optimistic. I'm number 15 on blue and white.
Wow, good.
So we got 35 representative last elections. So hopefully I can represent, the Israeli public interest again in the next parliament and come again and support and thank you for everything that you do, because it's not taken for granted, that's for sure.
And Orit, I just want to thank you so much for being my guest on the Middle East Report. Thank you for showing us the true face of Israel, and you represent the true face of Israel. And I wish you every success with the coming general election, and I pray that you'll get elected. And thank you for being such a wonderful spokeswoman, on behalf of Israel. So thank you for being on the Middle East Report. And I just want to thank you for watching the Middle East Report today. And as we've seen with this interview with Orit, that Israel is a vibrant democracy and is a light unto the nations. And that's why it's imperative and important that we pray for Israel, that we stand for Israel, and we fight for Israel. So thank you for watching today's Middle East Report.
I think we should sing this. Let's try this.
Kolor baleva penima nefesh Yehudi omia ulfatei mizrach kadima ayin letzion Sophia, Olovda Tzitvateinu, Ati